The forest had a language of its own. It whispered through the wind that danced along the treetops, breathed with the rustle of pine needles, and groaned softly in the sway of old trunks. Emma Callahan, age 7, didn't speak that language yet, but she listened. It was early morning, the third day of their yearly camping trip deep in the Black Hollow National Forest. Their tent sat nestled between moss-covered stones and thick evergreens, just off an old ranger trail few remembered. Emma's grandpa, Thomas Callahan, had risen at dawn, stoked the fire and brewed coffee in his battered tin kettle while Emma still snored, tangled in her sleeping bag. Now, she wandered a few yards from the campsite, her boots crunching softly through fallen needles. She crouched to examine a trail of tiny hoof prints in the mud. "Deer," she whispered to herself, a mix of curiosity and pride in her voice. Thomas had taught her how to track. She followed them, first slowly, then with growing confidence, until the trees thickened and the air felt different. Cooler. Quieter. Emma stopped. She turned to look behind her, expecting to see the faint column of smoke from their campfire. Nothing. The woods had swallowed it whole. "Grandpa?" she called, a little laugh catching in her throat. No answer. A few more steps, and the prince veered sharply into an older path. Barely a path at all. She hesitated, but something ahead caught her eye. A wooden structure hidden among the brush. It was an old cabin, slouched with age and weather, its door barely hanging from rusted hinges. The wind moaned low through broken slats. Emma crept closer. Inside, the cabin was musty and dark. She could see outlines of furniture. A splintered chair, a stove long gone cold, a table leg pointing skyward like a broken limb. But before she could turn around, engines roared from outside. Then came the voices. Men, loud, slurred, and angry. Emma ducked behind a crate as the door burst open. 5 figures stumbled in, soaked from the rain that had crept in without her noticing. Leather jackets, heavy boots, road dust in every crevice. One of them had a snake tattoo that curled up his neck like ivy. "Well, what do we have here?" the tallest man growled, squinting into the shadows. A sharp breath escaped her lips, too loud. He heard it. He yanked her up by the arm like she weighed nothing. "Look what wandered in, boys. A little bunny lost in the woods." Emma struggled. "Let me go. My grandpa's going to find me." The man leaned in, breath heavy with whiskey. "Thomas Callahan's brat," he said, almost laughing. "Looks like fate just dropped us a gift." Outside, thunder cracked. Rain pelted the roof. Then silence, and in that silence came a growl. Low, deep, primal. Every head turned toward the open doorway. A massive silver-gray wolf stood in the rain. Its amber eyes burned like twin coals, locked on the man holding Emma. Hackles raised, teeth bared, but it didn't advance. "What the?" One of the bikers started, reaching for a weapon. The wolf stepped forward. The biker holding Emma dropped her. She scrambled back, heart pounding, until she reached the threshold, the wolf's flank inches from her shoulder. Her hand, trembling, reached out, touched its fur. It didn't flinch. The men did. One took a shaky step back. "That's no ordinary wolf," he muttered. The leader didn't move. "It's just an animal. Don't let it fool you." But his voice wasn't as sure as it had been. The wind howled through the pines, like it was remembering something. And the forest, it seemed, had chosen a side. The rain fell harder as the sky over Black Hollow darkened into a bruised purple. Thunder groaned somewhere in the distance, a slow, rolling sound that vibrated through the timber. Inside the cabin, time moved in jagged pieces. Emma sat huddled near the broken hearth, arms wrapped tight around her knees. Her eyes never left the wolf, who hadn't budged from its place by the door. It stood like a sentry, rain dripping from its thick silver coat, ears sharp, amber eyes locked on the men. One of the bikers, a younger guy with a nervous twitch in his fingers, broke the silence. "Roy, you seeing this? It ain't scared." Royce Harmon, the leader, tall, broad, face hardened by years of grudges, stood across the room, hands deep in his jacket pockets. "I see it, Kyle," he said without looking. "And I see a problem that needs handling." He finally turned his gaze to Emma. "Your grandpa still carve those little wooden wolves?" Emma didn't answer. Roy clicked his tongue. "Didn't think so. Thought maybe after all these years, he'd grown some remorse." "Guess not." Kyle shifted uncomfortably. "She's just a kid, man. She's his kid," Roy snapped. "Well, his blood anyway. And blood remembers." Outside, the wolf let out a low, guttural growl. "No bark. No bluff. A promise." Back in the forest, Thomas Callahan knelt at the edge of a muddy trail, fingers pressed to the earth. Rain beat off the brim of his weathered hat as he studied a set of footprints, small, shallow, recent. Emma's boots. He rose slowly, eyes narrowing. She'd gone off trail, but not far. There were deeper prints nearby, heavier, angled hard into the mud. Boots, not hikers, and a second set, larger. Motorcycles, 5 or 6 of them. His chest tightened. He scanned the trees and saw it, the faint shimmer of tire tracks, curving off toward a forgotten service road. That road led to only one place, an old trapper cabin built in the 1930s, abandoned since the 90s. He remembered it because he'd once arrested 2 men there. One of them never made it back. Thomas moved quickly, keeping low, his rifle strapped across his back. Though it wasn't the weapon he trusted most. That weapon was knowledge of the land, the wind, and the kind of men who called themselves Iron Teeth. He hadn't heard that name in a long time. Inside the cabin, Roy poured a small amount of liquor into a tin cup, swirled it, and drank slowly. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "my baby brother used to love coming up these mountains." Said the silence was good for his mind. Then one day, he comes home in a bag. Said he fell. Just slipped off a cliff. Convenient. Kyle looked at Emma, then back at Roy. "You blaming her grandpa for that?" Roy turned. His eyes were cold. "Thomas Callahan chased him to that ledge. Claimed he tried to save him. But the only one who came down was the man with the badge." Emma spoke softly. "My grandpa helps people. He saves animals. He saved me." Roy smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Yeah, well, he didn't save my brother. And that's a memory that don't wash out." A crack of lightning tore through the sky. The wolf shifted, muscles taut beneath its coat. Thomas reached the clearing just as the storm eased into a heavy drizzle. His eyes locked onto the familiar shapes. Motorcycles leaned haphazardly near the collapsed porch. His heart hammered. He recognized one of the bikes instantly. Roy's custom Harley, black and rust-red, with twin wolf teeth painted on the tank. He crouched behind a fallen tree, raised his binoculars. Through the warped cabin window, he saw her. Emma, mud on her face, eyes wide, but alive. And then he saw it. The wolf. Bigger than he remembered wolves ever being. But something in its stance, its poise, sparked an old memory, buried under years of dust and guilt. Could it be? 15 years ago, he'd found a pack butchered by poachers. He'd rescued 3 pups, raised them for a season, before releasing them deep into the protected stretch of Timberline Ridge. He hadn't seen them since. But this one, Shadow, he whispered under his breath. Inside, Roy stood. 1 hour. We move to Canyon Point. If the old man wants his blood back, he'll come alone. Emma's stomach twisted. She didn't. Emma didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing. Her grandpa was walking into a trap. Kyle hesitated. "Roy, this is getting out of hand." Roy turned slow. "You can walk now, Kyle. But if you do, You ain't one of us. You never were. Kyle clenched his jaw but didn't move. From the trees, Thomas watched as Roy stepped outside and lit a cigarette beneath the porch. He didn't see Thomas. Didn't see the wolf slip silently into the underbrush. Tail low, body flowing like smoke. The pines stood silent around them, thick with memory, and blood was stirring beneath their roots. The rain had slowed to a steady mist, threading through the towering pines like whispered warnings. Inside the decaying cabin, the tension was brittle. Every breath felt like it might snap something. Emma sat still as stone, her back against the wall, her eyes flicking between the wolf and the men now packing up their gear. Roy tightened the strap on his weathered backpack, barking orders. We leave in 10. Thomas shows up alone at Canyon Point, where the girl disappears for good. Kyle hovered by the window, chewing his lip. You sure this is how you want to play it? Using a kid? Roy didn't bother looking at him. That ain't a kid. That's leverage. She's what he cares about most. Emma shifted, heart hammering. She glanced toward the broken window in the back, still cracked open, the wind gently breathing in through the jagged frame. The wolf sat by the doorway, still as stone. But when Emma's eyes met its amber gaze, something passed between them. Not language, not even instinct. Permission. The moment Roy stepped outside to check the bikes, Emma bolted. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just ran, straight through the back, diving through the open window, arms covering her head. Splinters caught her sleeve, tore fabric, but she hit the ground rolling and sprang to her feet. A roar erupted behind her. She's gone. Get her! But Emma was already in motion, lungs burning, legs churning over muddy ground. Behind her, boots pounded the earth. Then came the snarl. The forest exploded into motion. The wolf lunged from the trees with terrifying grace, crashing into one of the bikers mid-stride. The man screamed as the animal tore into his arm. Not to maim, but to stop. The others froze, weapons half-drawn, paralyzed by the sheer speed and force of the silver predator. Emma kept running, branches slapping her face, her small boots slipping on mossy rock. And then, through the trees, she saw him. Grandpa Thomas Callahan, dropped to his knees, arms out. Emma! She collided with him, sobbing, face buried in his chest. He held her tight, eyes already scanning the tree-line behind them. The wolf appeared, ears back, tongue lolling, breathing heavy but unhurried. Thomas looked at it, eyes narrowing. It's you, he murmured. Shadow! But the moment was short-lived. A gunshot cracked the air, snapping the forest into chaos. Bark splintered above Thomas's shoulder. He grabbed Emma, ducking behind a fallen log, heart pounding. Go! Roy's voice thundered from the ridge. Cut them off before they reached the ledge. Another shot rang out. The wolf darted into the brush, drawing fire away from the pair. Thomas lifted Emma into his arms and ran, years of wilderness training guiding his every step. He didn't need a map to know where they were headed. Canyon Point, the one place he never wanted to return to. 15 minutes later, soaked and scraped from the escape, Thomas laid Emma down beneath a thick spruce tree near a clearing. You stay here, he said, voice low, firm. No matter what happens, don't move until I come back. Understand? She nodded, trembling. Is Shadow coming with you? He looked at the wolf, now sitting just behind them like a silent guardian. He'll watch you. Then he turned and walked toward the ridge. Canyon Point was a jagged finger of stone jutting into the valley. One misstep, and the fall would snap bones before the wind even stole your scream. Thomas knew it intimately, because this was where it had happened. Roy stood near the edge, backlit by the last golden flicker of dusk. Behind him, 3 of his men spread out, weapons ready but uncertain. Thomas saw it in their eyes. None of them had expected to be here. None of them wanted to kill an old man over something that happened 15 years ago. Thomas walked into the open slowly, hands up. "I'm here." Roy turned, grin spreading like a crack in dry earth. "Took you long enough." "I came alone," Thomas said. "Let her go." Roy's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a trade? You don't get to walk away from what you did. I didn't kill your brother. You chased him to this cliff. I tried to save him." Thomas stepped closer, voice rising. "He slipped. I reached for him. I almost had him." "Liar!" Roy's face twisted with fury. He drew his pistol. "You're going to confess. Right here, right where it happened. You don't want justice," Thomas said quietly. "You want revenge." Behind them, the wolf emerged from the trees, moving like mist. Roy raised the gun. "Say it!" A cry rang out. "Emma!" She had followed them. Her small figure stood just beyond the trees, shadow pressed close to her side. Roy's gaze snapped toward her. Thomas saw the moment break, the tension fracturing. Royce turned, gun half raised toward Emma. "No!" Thomas roared, lunging forward. But Shadow moved first. The wolf sprang through the air, a blur of silver and rage. The shot went off mid-leap. The bullet missed Emma. It hit Shadow. The wolf landed hard, crashing into Roy, knocking him sideways just as Thomas tackled them both. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs and pain. Fists flew. Old rage erupted. But this time, Thomas didn't fight with anger. He fought with purpose. For Emma, the struggle ended with Roy pinned beneath him, coughing, bloodied but breathing. Thomas stood, shaking, breath ragged. Emma ran to his side. Her eyes went to the wolf, lying on its side, chest rising shallowly. "Shadow," she whispered, falling to her knees. "Grandpa, don't let him go." Thomas knelt beside her, hand gently resting on the wolf's fur. The same fur he once brushed with a bottle in his hand all those years ago. The same heart that once beat in a tiny pup, now thumped weak and fading. "I'm here," he said softly. "I'm here." Canyon Point was eerily quiet now. The kind of quiet that pressed against your ears like fog. The storm had rolled eastward, leaving behind a sky bruised with dusk and a ground slick with memory. Thomas knelt beside Shadow, his hand resting gently on the wolf's matted fur. Blood darkened the silver-gray coat at its side, pulsing slowly from a wound that had already begun to chill. Emma clung to the animal's neck, her tiny fingers buried deep, as if she could hold the wolf to the earth by will alone. Roy groaned, rolling onto his side. His gun lay feet away, kicked free in the scuffle. Thomas rose slowly, placing himself between the man and his granddaughter. For the first time, Roy didn't reach for his weapon. "You shot him," Emma said, voice thick with tears. "He saved me, and you shot him." Roy wiped blood from his split lip and spat it onto the rock. "Wasn't aiming for the mutt." Thomas stepped forward, his boots scraping the ledge. "You were aiming at a child." Roy gave a bitter laugh, then coughed. "I didn't mean to. I just—" He waved a trembling hand toward the forest. "I lost everything because of you." Thomas's voice was flat. "You lost your brother because he poached endangered wildlife and ran when I called him out. He died because he chose a cliff over accountability." Roy's eyes flicked toward the drop just feet away, the same edge where Tom Harmon had fallen 15 years ago. "You let him fall." "I tried to save him," Thomas snapped, emotion cracking through. "I tried, Royce." There was a beat of silence. Then a scream of tires and the thunder of engines broke through the trees. The rest of the Iron Teeth had arrived, late and tense. They parked crooked near the trail, their boots stomping toward the clearing with weapons drawn. But the moment had shifted. The sight of Emma sobbing over a dying wolf, of Royce bloodied and slumped, of Thomas standing without a gun but full of conviction. It stalled the group in place. Kyle, the youngest biker, stepped forward. "Boss!" Royce waved him off. "Put your weapons down." "But," I said, "put them down." His voice echoed off the stone. Slowly, reluctantly, the bikers obeyed. Thomas moved toward Roy, calm but firm. "This ends here. No more blood. No more revenge." Roy's jaw worked, but the fight had left him. Maybe it drained out with the blood trickling from his nose. Or maybe it slipped through his fingers when a wolf leapt between him and a little girl. He stared at Shadow. Why'd it protect her? Or me? "Because it remembered," Thomas said softly. 15 years ago, I pulled 3 pups from a den. Their mother died protecting them, raised them until they could return to the wild. That one," he pointed to Shadow. "He came back. He remembered the hand that helped him." Roy looked away, jaw clenched. Behind them, a faint whimper. Shadow tried to rise, legs trembling under the weight of its own body. Emma gasped, hugging the wolf's neck. Thomas crouched, stroking the coarse fur. "Don't move, buddy. Help's coming." The wolf's amber eyes locked on him, blinking slowly, acknowledging the end it knew was near. Roy stood, limping toward the edge. "Funny," he muttered, looking out over the drop. "You ever think maybe this place is cursed?" Thomas shook his head. "Not cursed, just full of people too proud to stop a fall." Roy turned to face him again. "So what now?" "You answer for what you did," Thomas said. "For the kidnapping, for the threats, for bringing a war to a little girl's world." To everyone's surprise, Roy nodded. "Maybe I should." Kyle stepped closer. "We don't have to run anymore, do we?" "No," Thomas said. "But you'll have to own what you did." Sirens echoed faintly from the distance. Someone had heard the shots, or the engines, or maybe the forest itself had whispered the truth. Thomas sat down beside Shadow again as the wolf's breaths grew fainter. Emma was silent now, her small body trembling with each shallow exhale beneath her hands. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Please." He didn't have a reply, just a quiet hand, steady on the fading heartbeat of something wild, something loyal. The sirens grew louder. The flashing lights of a sheriff's cruiser blinked between the trees. Deputies emerged, weapons raised at first, but Thomas raised a hand. "It's over," he said. Officers spread out, detaining the bikers without resistance. Roy stood tall as they cuffed him, meeting Thomas's gaze one last time. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About you, about all of it." Thomas nodded. "You're not the only one who's carried too much weight for too long." When the medics reached Shadow, it was already too late. Emma's face crumpled as the vet on site gently shook her head. Thomas held her as she sobbed, his own chest tight, his throat raw. "I'm sorry, kiddo," he whispered. "He saved us both." Together, they watched as the wolf's body was gently wrapped, prepared to be taken with honor. And for a moment, all of Black Hollow Forest stood still, pine boughs swaying, wind soft and reverent, as if nature itself bowed its head for one of its own. Shadow had made his choice, and in doing so, reminded them all of what it meant to be wild and loyal and free. 6 months later, the last snow had melted from the lower trails of Black Hollow, leaving the forest soft and green again. Spring had come to Rocky Falls, not with thunder, but with a quiet revival. Wildflowers bloomed along the ridgelines. Birdsong filtered through pine needles. Creeks rushed clearer than memory. Emma stood beside her grandfather at the edge of a small clearing, a bouquet of yellow columbines trembling in her hand. Before them was a flat stone, carved simply but carefully. To Shadow, who reminded us what loyalty means. Thomas had shaped it himself, chiseling every letter with the same hands that once bottle-fed wolf pups and taught his son to cast a fishing line. He hadn't needed to ask what to write. Emma had whispered those words the morning after. She stepped forward and laid the flowers on the marker. "He wasn't just a wolf," she said softly. "He was family." Thomas nodded, his throat too tight for words. The townspeople of Rocky Falls had mostly moved on from the incident. Royce Harmon had taken a plea deal after cooperating with the investigation. Most of the iron teeth scattered. Kyle, the hesitant biker, now worked odd jobs for a local construction company. He'd shown up one day and left a small wooden carving of a wolf on their porch, without a note. Thomas kept it on the mantel. Emma's nightmares had faded, slowly, like the scent of smoke after a fire. There were still moments, a slammed door, the smell of leather, that made her flinch. But there was also light. She returned to her books about wildlife, resumed her endless questions about ecosystems and pack behavior. She even asked Thomas once if she could study wolves when she grew up. He'd smiled and said, "You already have a head start." That afternoon, as they packed up to leave the memorial spot, Emma paused. Something rustled in the tree-line, a quiet shifting of pine needles. Not threatening, just present. She turned, holding her breath. At first, she saw nothing. Then, a sliver of movement. Out of the shadows stepped a smaller wolf, silver-gray with soft brown speckles across its muzzle. Its eyes were amber, wide and curious. Behind it, 3 others emerged, cautious but calm. A family. Emma gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. "Grandpa!" Thomas had already frozen. He knew that coloring. Not identical to Shadow, no, but unmistakably connected. The young wolf tilted its head, watching them before slowly stepping forward. It came only a few feet from the edge of the clearing before sitting, tail sweeping the forest floor, eyes locked onto Emma. She didn't move. "Do you think?" she whispered. "I think that's one of his," Thomas said. "A pup. Maybe even the last one left." Emma slowly knelt, just like she had 6 months ago, back when Shadow stood between her and danger. This time, there was no fear, only awe. The wolf didn't approach further, but it didn't flee either. Behind it, the others waited, watching. Thomas lowered himself beside her. "He remembered us," he murmured. "And maybe now they will too." They stayed like that a while, the 2 of them on one side of the clearing, the pack on the other, with nothing but wind and history between them. Eventually, the wolves rose and padded back into the trees, the young one looking back once before vanishing into the green. Emma stood slowly. "Do you think they'll come back?" "I think," Thomas said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "They've never really left." They walked home through the forest, light dappling the trail ahead of them. The woods felt different now. Not just a place of danger or memory, but of return, of second chances, of bonds that ran deeper than blood. That evening, Thomas sat on the porch with his mug of tea, while Emma played with the carved wooden wolf near the steps. She paused and looked up at him. "Grandpa, do you think Shadow knew he was going to die?" Thomas stared into the trees. "I think he knew what he was protecting was more important than himself." Emma was quiet a moment. Then she said, "He was brave." "Yes," Thomas replied, voice soft. "He was." The wind shifted through the pines, carrying with it a faint, distant howl. Not sad, not warning, just there. Emma looked up, wide-eyed. Thomas smiled. "Some bonds," he whispered, "are wilder than blood, and somewhere beneath the timberline sky, a legacy ran wild, remembered not just by men, but by the forest itself." I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.